An awful lot of coffee in Brazil goes an old American pop tune, and an awful lot of Brazilians as well. More than 20 million in the old coffee capital of Sao Paulo, site of round 2 of the Formula One World Championship for 1991, the Grand Prix of Brazil. Hello again, everyone. I'm Bob Varsha. Welcome to a very windy Circuit Jose Carlos Pache here in Sao Paulo. We're nearing the end of summer south of the equator. It is the rainy season, and the weather might well play a role before this Grand Prix is run. There is very little that has escaped Brazil's native son Ayrton Senna in his 8th year of his Formula One career. He has won 21 of the last 49 races and 2 of the last 3 world championships. But one thing he has yet to accomplish is to win his home Grand Prix in his hometown, Sao Paulo. With me to describe his latest attempt once again is ESPN Formula One analyst David Hobbs. David, Senna has his best chance yet this year.
Well, you're right, Bob. For the 54th time, he snagged pole position, but yesterday afternoon was not without its surprises, because sitting on the pole till 2.5 minutes from the end of the session was Riccardo Patrese in the Williams Renault, much to the disgust of his teammate Nigel Mansell, who had it before that. But Senna did his usual, 3 minutes to go, got the pole position. And it looks like being a good day for Brazil today also. Nelson Piquet back in 7th spot in the Benetton. Right behind him, Mauricio Gugelmin in the Leighton House Ilmore, looking very, very strong. And back in 14th spot is Roberto Marino. Well, it's going to be a tough afternoon in the pits today, and down there is John Bizignano.
David, as you can see, we are right down in the McLaren garage where the Honda engineers have all the computers fired up anticipating the start of the Brazilian Grand Prix. They're trying to give their drivers every advantage. Another factor very important here in Brazil is the track itself. It's made up of fast, sweeping left and right-hand corners and 2 straightaways where the cars actually exceed 190 miles an hour. Coming into turn 1, the cars are doing over 190, and they have to decelerate down to a mere 55 miles an hour before flicking the car to the left. That is some deceleration of over 140 miles an hour. Look for a lot of action in turn 1. To do well in Brazil, the driver must manage the car out on the track, and he must survive a very calculated pit stop. Here in Brazil, there's always a lot of action, both out on the circuit and certainly in the pit lane.
Thank you, John. Over 20 million people live in Sao Paulo, Brazil, and virtually everyone will be watching television to see if favorite son Ayrton Senna can pull it off this year. ESPN Speed World coverage of the Formula One Grand Prix of Brazil is brought to you by Busch Beer. Head for the mountains of Busch. By Acura Automobiles. Experience precision-crafted performance. And by Quaker State. The Big Q is one tough motor oil. We'll be back. Positions are being completed in the Ferrari cars. Bob Varsha and David Hobbs with you. Let's take a look at our weather conditions coming in. Very warm, 80 degrees and higher, 95% humidity. It has been raining on and off all morning here in Sao Paulo. Wind will be in the driver's faces coming up the pit straightaway. Chance of rain? Yes, it's been going on all day, as I mentioned, and that warm temperature will have severe implications for the pit strategy as this race develops. We're about to send the field of 26 on their way for 71 laps of this 2.687-mile circuit, and it's an interesting one, David.
Well, it is, because the front straightaway in front of us here, they peak out at about 190 miles an hour, go down to second for turn 1, now called the Senna curve. It's basically a 15-curve track. It's got quite a bit of elevation change. It's a medium speed, 126 miles an hour in qualifying, a lot of gear shifting, 26. And, of course, for most Formula One cars, it goes the wrong way. It's predominantly left-hand circuit. And even someone like Ayrton Senna had to buy himself a strap to hold his head up during this race today.
High G-force is expected. The cars are rolling off to warm tires. Let's give you the starting lineup for the Grand Prix of Brazil. On the pole for a record 54th time, the runaway crowd favorite, Ayrton Senna, in the McLaren Honda V12 with a record lap of 126 miles an hour. Next to him on the front row, Riccardo Patrese of Italy in the Williams Renault V10, making his record 210th Grand Prix start. On row 2, Nigel Mansell of Great Britain in the second Williams Renault, fastest in the morning warm-up. Next to him, Gerhard Berger of Austria, a man with something to prove in the second McLaren Honda V12. He hasn't been on a podium since Italy last year. Row 3 is all Ferrari and all Frenchmen. Jean Alesi of France, making his second start for his new team, and Alain Prost right next to him in the number 6 spot, second quickest in the morning warm-up. Watch Prost. Row 4 will be Nelson Piquet of Brazil in the Pirelli-shod Benetton Ford. Highest Pirelli runner. Those ahead of him all have Goodyear tires. Next to him, countryman Maurizio Gugelmin in the Leighton House with its Ilmor V10 engine. Gugelmin has legs burned when his fire extinguisher went off in his car during the morning warm-up. He may not go the distance. Row 5 will be Stefano Modena of Italy in the Tyrrell Honda with the V10 engine that took Senna to the championship last year. Next to him, the big surprise in qualifying from Belgium, Bertrand Gachot in the Jordan Ford with a V8 engine running very well. Row 6 will be Eric Renard of France in the LaRousse with a Ford V8 next to the Dallara Judd V10 of Emanuele Pirro of Italy. Row 7, Andrea de Cesaris of Italy in the second Jordan Ford next to the second Benetton of Brazilian Roberto Moreno. Row 8 will be Ivan Capelli of Italy in the second Leighton House next to the Tyrrell Honda V10 of Japanese Satoru Nakajima. Row 9 will be Aguri Suzuki of Japan in the second LaRousse Lola Ford next to Belgian Terry Boutsen in the Ligier with Lamborghini V12 power. Row 10, J.J. Leto of Finland in the Dallara Judd V10 next to Italian Pierluigi Martini in a Minardi with a Ferrari V12 engine behind his head. Row 11 will be Italian Gianni Morbidelli in the second Minardi next to the Lotus of Mika Hakkinen of Finland, youngest driver in the field at age 22. Row 12, Eric Comas of France in the second Ligier Lamborghini next to the AGS Cosworth of Gabriella Tarquini of Italy. The 13th and final row, all British, all Brabham Yamaha V12s. Martin Brundle next to teammate Mark Blundell. Those who failed to make the cut in final qualifying, Alex Cathy and Michele Alboreto in the two Footwork Porsche V12 cars, Stefan Johansson of Sweden and Julian Bailey of Great Britain. Those who did not pre-qualify in Friday morning session, Eric Van der Poel of Belgium, Nicola Larini, Pedro Chavez of Portugal, and Olivier Griard of France. Let's get a quick pit update now as our pole sitter brings the field to the grid. Here's John Visignano.
Very quickly, Bob, Senna is actually in the T car. He says there wasn't anything wrong with the race car, but he just prefers the handling on the T car. Berger had a problem with the rear end of his McLaren. They did not find anything wrong. I hope the problem has sorted itself. Modena, he has had an engine change. They had a pickup problem. Gugelmin is taking the start, but they don't know how long he's going to last. He's in a great amount of pain. We have new gearboxes on Pirro and Boots, and we're ready for a lot of pit action.
The car is coming to the starting grid. Once they settle into position, there will be a red light, and within a few seconds, some 10 to 15 seconds in the first round at Phoenix a couple of weeks ago, we will get the green light and send the cars on their way. The sun is now breaking through for the first time today. The track will heat up. If we do get another rain squall, it will dry out very quickly. The cars have come into position. Turn them up. 233 revolutions per second per engine.
On fire.
Gerhard
Berger's car is flaming out the back.
Right in the middle of your field where you see the puff of smoke there, that's Gerhard Berger in the red and white McLaren. Through the center curve, into the sharp left-hand Curva del Sol, curve of the sun. One of the Dallaras off, looked like Emanuele Pirro. Senna with the lead, followed by the two Williams cars who went away from the line side by side. There are rumors that the two Williams drivers, Mansell and Patrese, are not seeing eye to eye.
One of the problems being that Patrese out-qualified Nigel Mansell yesterday afternoon, which I don't think went down very well. Oh, and there's poor old Gabriel Tarquini.
Oh, the AGS, one of the underfunded teams in Formula One, and that will not do them any good at all. He's up against the wall.
Nigel Mansell's convinced he can win this race if it stays dry. He's not looking forward to it raining, but he certainly gave Senna a run for his money yesterday afternoon. This morning he was quickest, as you've already said, and he really wants a dry race because he feels convinced that he can win it.
Little over 2.5 miles around. You see one of the Williams cars. I believe that's Mansell. Hard to tell. Both drivers have white helmets. Our pictures coming to us from TV Globo here in Brazil, the host broadcasters for today's event.
Gerhard Berger's car, when it went by here from the grid, was spewing out flame and smoke out the back. It must have been some sort of oil leak that developed while it's stationary on the grid and has managed to burn itself out.
Into the curve that is named for him. The Senna S goes Ayrton Senna. Some 75,000 seats here at the Jose Carlos Pache circuit. Many thousands more are standing along the fences. The economic situation has improved here in Brazil, and a lot of people were able to afford a couple of $100s for a ticket to this race.
Gerhard Berger's car still leaving a trail of flame as he went past the commentary box here, but not much smoke. Senna seems to be putting a bit of a distance between himself and Mansell. This is one, of course, Senna's really strong points. He gets off to some absolute dynamite starts.
Here is your order at the end of lap 1. Senna, Mansell, Patrese, Jean Alesi, Gerhard Berger in a car that may have a problem. Nelson Piquet in 6th, followed by Alain Prost, Stefano Modena in the Tyrrell, Mauricio Gugelmin in the Leighton House with those damaged legs, Van Bertrand Gachot in the Jordan in the 10 spot.
Because what basically happened to Guterman this morning was the fire extinguisher went off, and of course with that carbon dioxide compressed in there, what it does, it gives you frostbite. It sprays right on his leg, and effectively gave him a spot of frostbite right on his leg, which apparently is very painful and could be highly dangerous.
It could be terminal. They're not sure if he'll be able to go the distance. He was able to walk around, but he contacted Formula One's official doctor, Dr. Sid Watkins of Great Britain, and he is in the field. Ayrton Senna flashes across the start-finish line at 187 miles an hour. Very steep first corner here. Television pictures don't make it look quite as steep as it is. They dive down through there. There you see the elevation change in the background. The gap 1.4 seconds from Senna to Mansell, first and second.
Still going downhill towards the lakes here. This road now goes between two lakes, the larger and the lesser. And at this point, starting to go uphill again here, just running off the edge of the road there. It gives you an idea of just how wet it is, just offline here. None of these guys want to hit this grass, because if they do, they're not going to stop for a long way. And of course, if it rains, it rains very heavily here.
I mentioned the temperature would be critical. The track is quite warm, so if it does rain, they will go to rain tires, but it will dry off very quickly, so we could see lots of tire changes going on in the pits today. Ayrton Senna turned 31 years of age on Thursday afternoon. There was a big party for him in the pit lane, during which someone walked off with 27 passes for his family and friends, and Ayrton Senna went into a towering rage.
Very bumpy there as they come into this last major third gear left-hand corner. They're still going downhill, as you can see, and they start to go uphill as they go around this left-hander right back to the start-finish line. It's uphill all the way.
No change in the running order yet. Let's get down to the pit lane and John Bizignano.
I am in the McLaren pit, and it is a mystery here exactly what's wrong with Gerhard Berger's car. They were hoping that it could be something as simplistic as a blocked breather tube, and that had filled with oil or other type of flammable liquid, and when he took off, that blocked breather tube came open and found something hot. But right now they're down here. I can count 5, 6 extinguishers waiting for him to stop, which he has not chosen to do yet.
A look into the cockpit of Ayrton Senna, the runaway crowd favorite here. It's hard to overstate the popularity of this man here in Brazil. Bizignano with you. There is the gap from first to second on the racetrack. Ayrton Senna, with his record 54th pole position, led the field away. Nigel Mansell running in second position.
Nigel's hanging on to about a 1 1/4 second disadvantage there, but they're both pulling away from Riccardo Patrese, nearly 5 seconds ahead of him. Right behind him is young Jean Alesi in the first of the two Ferraris. So a lot of action going on there, but unfortunately, you better be prepared to see that this is the only car you're going to see this afternoon. As long as it's still running, this is the car we're going to be looking at, and there's nothing we can do about that.
Ayrton Senna. Everything he does makes news down here in Brazil. He has broken up with his longtime girlfriend, an enormously popular television figure named Xuxa, and he is now reportedly dating an American model. Ayrton Senna said in Phoenix he loves the United States. I guess I know why now.
I wouldn't be surprised to see him do an Emerson Fittipaldi and buy himself a house in Miami, which of course has got the closest weather approximation to here in Brazil.
Emerson Fittipaldi has won twice on this racetrack, and also known as Interlagos. David already explained the two lakes on the infield, Superior and Inferior, and the track runs between them, hence Interlagos, between the lakes.
But of course, Senna's big hope, his big wish today, and of course the fervent hope of the thousands of people stacked into these stands, is that he's going to win this race, because that would be the first time he's won his home Grand Prix. Al Prost, meanwhile, lurking back in 7th spot, has won this race a cool 6 times since 1980.
Including last year when he broke the hearts of the fans here by coming out and winning in only his second race with Ferrari. Across the start-finish line they come, still on full tanks.
Now then, one of the things these guys are going to have to be careful here, there's undoubtedly going to have to be a pit stop. This is a hard course on tyres, medium speed, like I say, about 125 miles an hour. They're definitely going to have to make a pit stop. The thing they're going to have to be very careful is that they don't end up making two. And so both Senna and Mansell, who are driving away from the field at a prodigious speed, have got to be very careful here of how they abuse or use their tyres. It's no good running out of tyres too soon making a premature stop at, say, lap 15 or 18, when they may well have to make another one before the race is over. Because this is the time in the race when the tyres really get their hardest thrashing. The car's the heaviest, and they're trying to put as much daylight between himself and Mansell as possible.
Let's get a pit report with John Bizignano.
David, just a little bit more information on that tire situation. Everyone on the grid was on the softest possible compound. It was the C compound for Goodyear, and Pirelli was their very, very soft compound. And what you're saying is that the team managers here are scared to death of them wearing out those tires on the full tanks, trying to fight for the battle up front. If they make 2 pit stops, they are absolutely dead. They have to manage the car. They have to manage the tires. That's the only way to have success here in Brazil. 2 pit stops here, that's going to kill you.
And you're on board right now with a man who perhaps guards his equipment better than anybody else in the history of the sport. Alain Prost of France in the Ferrari.
Following Nelson Piquet in the Benetton, which of course is the front runner here on Pirelli tires. Pirelli putting a great deal of effort into that Benetton team with Nelson Piquet, and in fact the new car, when it arrives at Imola next month, will be designed largely around the Pirelli tire, or the Pirelli tire will be made to suit that car.
There you saw Gerhard Berger showing no ill effects of those flames from the back of his car at the start. Berger running in 5th position.
Something must have overflowed while he was giving it 10 pennyworth to stick on the grid. Caught fire, and it's obviously whatever was coming out has finished, run out.
10 penny worth of stick. You're going to have to speak English here, David.
Oh, I'm sorry about that.
It is Senna by 2.6 seconds now over Nigel Mansell, who may be playing a waiting game. Behind him, Williams teammate Riccardo Patrese, number 3.5 seconds in arrears. Jean Alesi, 2.6 seconds behind Patrese. Gerhard Berger, just over a second behind Alesi. Then Piquet, Prost, Modena, Gugelmin, and Gasho, the top 10.
Bertrand Gasho in 10th, where he qualified, is right behind Mauricio Gugelmin. I mean, absolutely right behind him. So you could have a pass there. That the Jordan car has gone exceptionally well. Now you've got another view from the inside of Alain Prost cars. He catches up with Nelson Piquet on the entry to this last third gear left-hander, accelerating now, as you can see, up to the start-finish line. They peak out at about 185 as they cross the line, but there's another 200 or 300 yards to go. They get nearly 190 right at the end of the straight. There they go across the line. There
is a dummy grid. There are 2 sets of starting positions out here on the racetrack, so it does get a little bit confusing.
Prost made a lot of ground on that lap.
Closing right in. There is Nelson Piquet, one of 4 Brazilians in this field. Ironically, Piquet doesn't seem to share the same public support and popularity that Ayrton Senna does.
Nelson Piquet, of course, not only the first car on Pirelli, but of course the first V8 engine car in this race. That's got the special Ford HB engine as opposed to the Ford Cosworth, and it develops a good bit more horsepower and revs a lot more. This engine in this car is reputed to pull over 13,000 RPM, which for a 3.5 litre V8 is pretty staggering.
Something over 100 spark plug firings per second in that car. These machines are absolutely unbelievable. His 8-year Formula One career. We'd like to tell you about our first NASCAR Winston Cup race coming your way on ESPN from the Lady in Black, Darlington, South Carolina, April 7th, Sunday, live at 1 p.m. Eastern Time, the NASCAR Trans-South 500. First event on the Winston Cup schedule here on ESPN. We'll hope you join us. April 7th, Sunday, 1 p.m. Eastern Time, live. Here in Brazil, we have 9 laps complete, working lap 10 of 71. We talked about Mauricio Gugelmin early on with his burned legs, whether he'd get very far into the race. We've had pit action down at Leighton House. Here's John Bizignano.
Bob, unfortunately, Mauricio Gugelmin only took the green light and did a few laps. He was actually lifted out of the car ever so gently by his crew and has walked on his legs, limping very much on the right leg to the back of the garage. His Grand Prix of Brazil is definitely over.
All right, thank you, John. We apologize. We don't have a camera in the pits. We didn't have the wherewithal to provide that camera here in Brazil, where things do get a little bit hectic around Formula One time. But we'll bring you all the information we can. As you watch Jean Alesi of France, now in 4th position, 3.1 seconds out of 3rd place, and Riccardo Patrese.
And of course, just behind him was Gerhard Berger, teammate to this man, Ayrton Senna, who we see leading the race still by about 2.25 seconds, 2.5 seconds over Nigel Mansell. But I'm sure that these two are playing a cat and mouse game with each other now on this absolutely critical position of tyre wear. Of course, all that may just go a little bit by the board if it rains. because then they'd have to change tyres. Anyway, you go into wets. And as you've already said, the track temperature here is pretty warm, which, of course, exacerbates the tyre wear as we see the cars at the moment. And when it rains, they'll almost certainly have to change to wets because it rains so hard here, but it also dries out very, very quickly.
You saw the gap from first to second place as Ayrton Senna makes his way around with the black, green, and yellow colors of Brazil on his helmet, as they have been since his days in the World Karting Championships as a teenager. The man, by consensus, may be the best driver ever in Formula One. It's so hard to compare a man like Senna with a Fangio or a Sterling Moss. Hard enough to compare him with one of his contemporaries like Alain Prost.
But the statistics are starting to pile up in Senna's favor. There's no doubt about it that when it comes to qualifying, he's in a class of his own, and I think a class in his own probably ever, because the competition is undoubtedly much more strong today than it was, and of course there's a lot more of it.
Ayrton Senna won his 54th pole here today. Counting ahead, I believe, if my math is correct, in 3 more races, if he takes the next 3 poles, he will arrive at a pretty staggering statistic. He will have started on pole in fully half of the Formula One races in his career.
And when you think of the first 2 teams he drove for, the Tolman, which was struggling a little bit when he drove for them in 84, and even Team Lotus in 85, that is an absolutely incredible statistic. Nigel Mansell leaving plenty of road there between himself and the edge, possibly not just hustling that car along quite as hard as he could, which would all be part of the cat and mouse game here of making these tyres last. They've got to make these tyres last at least 30 laps or 20 laps, because that'll give them another 40 odd to go. But of course it'll be an easier 40 as the fuel load's gone down.
Working lap number 13. Senna has turned out the fast lap of the race at a 1:21. He qualified at 1:16. That gives you some idea of how much speed they give up when they go from a qualifying setting to a race setting in these cars.
Mind you, that lap record will come down, I would think, to about a 1:19 as this race progresses and the cars get lighter. Now there you see, that's Roberto Marino in the second car there, following right behind. That must be Andrea de Cesaris in one of the Eddie Jordan 7-Up cars.
On the right is de Cesaris. On the left, Moreno. Moreno closing rapidly. He's looking for a way around.
And as we all know, Andrea de Cesaris is not the easiest man in the world to pass. But Roberto Moreno, of course, we want to do very well here, being another Brazilian.
Now, come on, David. I get a lot of letters from fans saying, lay off Andrea de Cesaris. Other guys crash, too, you know.
They do?
There is your leader, Ayrton Senna, rumored to make between 12 and 13 million US dollars a year as a Formula One driver.
I wish you'd stop mentioning those incredible amounts of dough. You'll be making Mario quite upset back at home. I think he's just about to go into traffic. That, of course, is Martin Brundle.
Oh, Satoru Nakajima is off in one of the Tyrrells.
Another fairly familiar pose. Poor old Satoru well and truly off there.
It was Nakajima a year ago who had a collision with leader Ayrton Senna that knocked Senna out of a chance to win his Formula One race. To the right of your screen, one of the Brabhams. I think that's
Martin Brundle, who's running actually dead last at the moment. They're not having a happy time here again. Can't wait till they get to Imola and they have their new chassis to go with their V12 Yamaha engine.
I saw a yellow helmet. I thought it was Carlos Pache in Sao Paulo, Brazil. You're watching the Grand Prix of Brazil. The late Carlos Pache won his one and only Formula One victory here in 1975 before he tragically was killed in a plane crash here in Brazil in 77.
There's old Jerry Berger, who is running some long way behind his teammate Ayrton Senna, 22 seconds behind, in fact. Running just in front of Nelson Piquet, who of course has Alain Prost behind him.
Just ahead of him, to the right of your screen, see the red Ferrari of Jean Alesi in his second start for Ferrari.
Running in a pretty strong fourth, but it's pretty staggering the amount of time that Senna and Mansell have put between themselves and the rest of the field. Mansell being nearly 10 seconds ahead of his teammate Riccardo Patrese, who in turn is 5 seconds in front of the battling duo of Piquet and Prost.
A shot from high overhead as their leader laps a slower car.
Yes, is that Brundle?
Oh, that's Blundell. You were right. First
Blundell.
he lapped Martin Brundle. Now he's lapping Mark Blundell, who is his teammate. And if you're a Japanese broadcaster, the two are basically the same name.
Especially they all got Japanese sponsors because they're going to get a lot of airtime in Japan.
That's right.
Not getting much today, though, unfortunately. This man here, Ayrton Senna, until he drops out of this race or wins it, is going to get 100% of our airtime this afternoon. Nigel Mansell only just behind him. As you can see, that little bit of traffic there has closed the gap up.
That 1.9 seconds on the graphic, very deceiving. As you can see, he's just a few car lengths behind now. Nigel Mansell may be closing in to try a move for the lead on Ayrton Senna.
Nigel Mansell very confident before this race started that he was certainly capable of winning it. There's no doubt about it that the Williams Renault, the Renault engine, a V10 as opposed to the Honda V12, certainly seems to be giving sufficient horsepower. Nobody, of course, tells you just how much horsepower these engines do or do not give. But whatever it is, it's obviously giving enough. And the car seems to be good. This is a brand new car. First appeared at Phoenix. Both these cars are brand new, of course. But still in all, the Williams put up a very good show yesterday afternoon, and Nigel went into this race with great confidence. Confidence which at the moment does not seem to be misplaced.
There's Nigel closing in. You talked about horsepower. Everyone roughly agrees the top engines are producing in the area of 750. So if you divide by 12 cylinders, you're getting 62 horsepower, give or take. If you divide by 10 cylinders, it's 75 horsepower per cylinder. And you're talking about a mechanical volume that's less than what you could stuff in a soft drink can. These are truly incredible machines.
Traffic there played initially into Senna's hands.
You see the Ferrari pits there, the yellow shirts of the Ferrari team. They may be ready for a pit stop. Beyond them, you see the McLaren team. They look like they might be ready as well. 15 laps are complete. Tires may be going away. As John Bizignano mentioned earlier, they started on the softest possible compound. And the cars may not be set up for these conditions. I mean, everybody thought there was a chance of rain. They may be running softer suspensions. The cars looking for a little bit more grip, maybe going through their tires.
Well, I think also that the McLaren team have had to run harder than they wanted to because of Nigel Mansell and the Williams. And if they have to stop within the next couple of 3 laps, they're going to be in serious trouble because, as you say, 16 laps down, that really is just a fraction too early.
From high overhead, there you see the gap. Nigel Mansell now has dropped back just a little bit.
But not much. I mean, he is certainly well within striking distance. All it needs is Senna to get caught up in just a bit of bad traffic, and Nigel will be all over him like a real cheap suit.
And we have Alain Prost in the pits. Here's John.
Alain Prost is in the pits. The car is up in the air. They had a little bit of trouble. Just a tad of trouble with the right rear. One of the rear tires just went past me and is in excellent shape, but definitely must have been losing a little bit of grip. Alain Prost did not like the way the car felt. The fronts are also in good shape. These tires are not rooted in any way. They just lost a little bit of grip, and he wanted to make a change.
The Goodyear tire engineers will tell you that the cars have become so easy on tires that wear is not a problem. When they run into problem is on wheel spin, coming off these corners as these incredibly powerful engines want to spin the tires on these cars. Oh, there's Ivan Capelli. Capelli in the Leighton house has stopped on the course. Alain Prost has dropped back to 7th position now as a result of that pit stop. So it's Senna, Mansell, Patrese, Alesi, Berger, Piquet, Prost, Modena. I'm not sure that's updated information. I think Prost was running 7th at the time.
I think he's further back than 7th now.
Yeah. John has another thought from the pits.
The reason they brought Prost in so early, his tires looked very good when they came off the car, is that I guess he was stuck behind Piquet and just couldn't get around him. So they decided it was a managerial decision to bring him in, break the 2 cars up, and let him go back on the track with some new rubber. But David, I'm wondering, can that same situation develop and also make Prost drive very hard and have to stop twice, which of course will be devastating to him. There's no way he'll be able to recover from 2 stops. He's come in very, very early.
Well, of course, he has lost a 1/4 of his fuel load, so the car has lightened up a little bit. And I think he could probably go to the end.
Nigel Mansell making a perfect pit stop in his area, and everybody jumping all over the car. A bit of problem with the right side. Oh, he almost killed the engine. Mansell definitely having a problem with the engine. A terrible misfire. I believe he had it in the wrong gear. That automatic gearbox, he could not find first gear. He was trying everything. I heard him go through at least 4 gears while everyone was frozen around him. He's back out on the track now. Good luck, Nigel.
Well, that was a 14-second pit stop. Now, really, all Senna has to do is make a perfect pit stop. All that rubbish on the track is coming from I think it's coming from the crowd side.
But I think it is. I think the crowd is throwing something out on the racetrack.
If Senna makes a good pit stop, that should give him about a 7-second advantage. He should be able to make a pit stop himself in about 7.5 to 8 seconds. But just the lap before we went away there, and before Nigel came in, I had seen him lock his brakes up going into turn 1, which is an indication that either the front tyres were going off or that he in fact did flat spot it and had to make a stop.
There you see Jean Alesi in the Ferrari,
who will now be up to 3rd spot.
Nigel Mansell behind him, so make Alesi now. Senna is now in. Our race leader is in the pits. Here's John.
Yes, we are at the McLaren pit. Ayrton Senna, the leader of this Brazilian Grand Prix, coming in very quickly, stopping at the very first pit stop. And he is out of here. He had no trouble whatsoever. The perfect McLaren boys are all set, and I think the Ferrari lads are also set. We'll bring you that report as soon as it's very chaotic down here, Tim.
6.93 seconds. It's hard to get one much faster than that. Ayrton Senna might, all other things being equal, have won the race right there. Or had it won for him by his McLaren crew.
One of the things that happened to Nigel, of course, was while he was struggling to get that gear in the pits, John said the engine was misfiring. I think what it was up against the rev limiter. And when you've got no drive going through the car, to run the engines that fast when they're in neutral, of course, that in itself doesn't do the engine a great deal of good. But, you know, when you're stuck there trying to find a gear, I know the feeling extremely well.
John has a comment.
You're exactly right, David. He was trying to find those gears. He was blipping it very high every single time he tried to select another gear. And, of course, he dropped the clutch a couple times and almost killed the engine. His feet were moving faster than they had ever had down in that foot box. But he saved the engine. He kept it running. Everyone is set up down here for pit stops.
Keep in mind that Renault engine, alone among Formula One power plants, has a pneumatic, a compressed air valve system.
Very good point. No, that saves the trouble of bouncing valves around, and it does certainly help on an over-revving situation. There's no doubt about it.
Takes a lot of the moving parts. None of the overhead cams, gear-driven usually, or chain-driven off the crankshaft. Uses compressed air. Truly a miraculous system. There's one of the LaRousse cars. I believe that was Eric Bernard.
Eric Bernard, of course, going past Thierry Boutsen. And now there, if you want some bad blood and bad feeling, not between those two drivers, but between those two teams. Ligier definitely want to be the #1 team in France. And unfortunately for them, the LaRousse team clearly is. And it's just one of those things they're finding very hard to put up with.
There you see the gap from first to second place. Ooh. Ricardo Patrese has pulled up, but he has not stopped yet.
Now then, the thing is, Senna will no doubt make ground very fast here because he's got new tyres, and because it'll be interesting to see how quick Nigel Mansell carved his way through the field after that somewhat disastrous pit stop for him.
There are the top 6. Senna, Patrese, Mansell, 8 seconds back. Alesi, Berger, and Piquet. Patrese, Alesi have not stopped. Neither has Gerhard Berger. Behind them, Nelson Piquet is in 6th, followed by Alain Prost up to 7th. Roberto Moreno is 8th, and Bertrand Gachot running in 9th position in that V8-powered car.
An amazing display of both driving, team managership, teamwork was at Senna at only 25 odd laps into the race, being able to make a pit stop and having pulled out enough that he could maintain the lead.
You're on board with Senna now, going underneath. I guess that's Boutsen. Now flying across the start-finish line, down into the curve that is named for him. This is Senna's S-curve. Oh, I thought we'd stay on board with him. Now into the long left-hand Curva do Sol, Sun Curve. This is Ricardo Patrese in the number 6 Williams car in the pits. Here's John.
Ricardo Patrese is 1 in the pits, but we also have John Alesi in the Ferrari right in front of me. Alesi, the car's up in the air. They're doing an excellent job. All the mechanics up. That gearbox had no problem whatsoever. And the Williams car got on in. Gerhard Berger is my worst nightmare. Gerhard Berger. All 3 cars, there's black rubber everywhere, but every mechanic and journalist survived. We had Berger, Patrese, and of course, everyone got out of the pits alive this time.
Well, I just hope that all the mechanics and journalists in the pits are keeping their eyes peeled, because by the time those cars reach the end of pit lane from their pits here They're reaching about 140 miles an hour.
And it was just a year ago that the Williams car of Terry Boutsen lost brakes, and he knocked one of his mechanics for a loop. Scary moment of the pits, but everything seems to be okay right now. And this will...
I mean, the car is so important, and the aerodynamic is very, very critical. 1 millimeter of difference at the front is making a big change in performance.
It's very important. It can lose you, tenths going up to a second a lap easily on aerodynamics.
All the new models are much quicker than us because there is a better shape, better efficiency between downforce and top speed.
This is very important for the future, but this is the problem for the little team because we don't have a big engineering to study in the gallery in the this system, and for this reason I think there is a lot of difference between the car.
Formula One is all nearly aerodynamics. It's, I would say, most of the downforce, most of the grip is through downforce. You can see that in slow corners, maybe like Phoenix, we're not so fast, and it's only when there is fast corners that we can go quicker.
Once again this year, we'll give you the opportunity to ask a question of the Formula One driving fraternity. Just address your question to Ask the Driver, Post Office Box 309, Crestwood, Kentucky 40014. With 36 laps complete, we have just passed halfway in the Formula One Grand Prix of Brazil. We've abbreviated our coverage just a little bit for time purposes, but we're showing you all the action. You're not missing anything on the racetrack or in the pits. Your leader is Ayrton Senna by 5.7 seconds over Nigel Mansell. Third is Ricardo Patrese, Mansell's teammate. Fourth, Nelson Piquet. Fifth, Alain Prost. Gerhard Berger is sixth, followed by Jean Alesi, Roberto Moreno, Bertrand Gachot, and Pierluigi Martini. 8 cars. Roberto Moreno, the last car on the lead lap. In the next 10, Gianni Morbidelli is 11th, followed by Eric Comas, Terry Boutsen, Mika Hakkinen, and then 2 laps down, Martin Brundle and Emanuele Pirot.
And there you see Gerhard Berger coming out onto the front straight. And not so very far behind him is Jean Alesi in the Ferrari.
And the Ferrari is in the pits. Let's get down to John Bizignano.
Alain Prost in for his second time. This is the worst thing that could happen to him in Brazil. He stopped very early on in the race, even with the lighter fuel load. The tires just could not go that distance with that much fuel being driven that hard. Alain Prost, a very quick stop by Ferrari, but it was stop number 2, and here, that's devastating.
Under 6 seconds. I can't believe that pit stop.
Well, if you look at the left front tire of Ayrton Senna's car as he comes into the turn 1 here, it's definitely got a very large black line around the outside of the left front tire there. But it could be because he's just gone through a long left-hand complex, and that being the unloaded tire, it may be just feathering across the road and just scuffing it up. Obviously, he's got his finger on the pulse. Doesn't look so bad there after he's gone through that right-hander.
It's the driver's left, our right. You're looking for a little black streak. It goes right out by the shoulder, and you're right. You could see it on the front straightaway, David, but it's not so clear now.
It could be that those double or triple left-handers, the tire just feathers a bit as it's unloaded and sort of drags across the road. But nevertheless, whatever's happening, Nigel Mansell is certainly winding him in slowly but surely. 4.8 seconds behind now. Just a few laps ago, he was 7.5 seconds. And that, of course, is after that horrendous pit stop that Nigel had.
At this point, it is all Ayrton Senna and Nigel Mansell. Ricardo Patrese in third, some 34 seconds back. Nelson Piquet another 6 seconds in the rear. And then Gerhard Berger 5 seconds further back than that. The gap now 4.3 seconds. Mansell has cut a half a second off in less than a lap. Let's get down to John Bizignano.
David, what they're thinking that black rim is around the tires, that the tire is picking up rubber, just as you say, when the tire feathers around those corners, it lifts up off the ground just ever so slightly, and they think that it's scuffing along the track and picking up black rubber that has been laid down on the surface of the track. They're hoping that it's nothing more serious than that.
Well, it certainly could be that, because it appears worst of all as he goes into turn 1, which is after he's been through that long left-hand complex of corners, starting off with that third gear left-hander.
There you see the distance now. The yellow dot on your picture is Ayrton Senna. The green is Nigel Mansell. Third place, Ricardo Patrese, just crossing the start-finish line. We are working lap number 40 of 71. Our pictures being provided to you by Globo TV here in Brazil, and we thank them for that. Our timing from Olivetti and Longines. And it is a miraculous system that gives us lap-by-lap times and keeps track of the grid throughout the race. We still have 8 cars on the lead lap. Roberto Moreno is the tail ender. There's Mika Hakkinen at 22, the youngest driver in Formula One, about to be overtaken by our race leader. Hakkinen running 13th. Team in Formula One now a bit down on luck. It is Senna, Mansell, Patrese, Piquet, Berger, Alesi in the points-paying position. This man in first stands to pick up 10 points this year. In previous years it was 9 points for a victory. It is 10 this year. 6 for second, 4 for third, 2 for fourth, 3 for fourth, 2 for fifth, and 1 for sixth. Now there's Roberto Moreno, I believe. Or is that Piquet? That's Nelson Piquet, I believe. But there is Gerhard Berger in the second McLaren. Piquet runs in fourth, Berger fifth. Nigel Mansell has closed up on Senna to 3.2 seconds, so we may yet see a battle for the lead here as Mansell tries to overcome a terrible pit stop. Took him some 14 seconds to get back on his wheels again after trouble with his transmission in the pits, while Senna got through in under 7 seconds.
Interesting to see if anybody else decides to do an Alan Prost and make 2 tire stops. But it's going to be kind of over my dead body-ish from either Senna or Mansell at this stage of the game. That's Gerhard Berger in the second McLaren. He is running in 5th spot, trying to catch up Nelson Piquet in the Benetton, who's just a few seconds in front of him there. There you see Nelson Piquet coming down that long left-hander. Right behind him, Gerhard Berger. This is that first left-hand corner here, 3rd gear, and then it's all left from here up to the pits. And I think that's what making that stripe on Senna's tyre as he picks up rubber as the tyre feathers across the road. Berger, of course, having to look good in these races. The pressure is really on Gerhard Berger because Senna this year has suddenly leapt to an extreme prominence over his team driver, and Gerhard Berger must be looking over his shoulder. And of course, one of the people he's going to see over that shoulder is young Michael Andretti.
Here comes the Ferrari team in action once again. This is Jean Alesi. Here's John.
John Alesi has come into the very fast Ferrari pit area. They are working overtime today. In talking to Lee Gogg, the manager of Goodyear International Motorsports, he said what Ferrari is trying to deal with here is that the car just isn't fast enough, and they're trying to find different tire combinations out there on the track to help their drivers. I've looked at every single tire that has come off of these red cars. There is no problems with the tires whatsoever. They have no blisters of any kind whatsoever, definitely picking up some rubber. And what they're looking for out there is nothing more but a little bit of extra speed.
Well, that one just cost him. Alesi was in the 6th and final points-paying position. As you look down on Nigel Mansell, who is now close to within 3 seconds of our leader, Ayrton Senna. Alesi dropped out of the final points-paying position. If he can't get back into it, that could be costly later on in the season, as Ferrari and McLaren are expected to battle for constructors' honors in 1991. 3.4 seconds, that's not current information. It is 2.9 seconds by my watch from Nigel Mansell up to Ayrton Senna. There is Mansell making his way around. And what a drive if he can overcome 7 extra seconds spent in the pits.
Well, in effect, of course, he's already overcome those 7 by being just this close behind at this stage. Now, this is a sudden camera cut here. That, in fact, is Gerhard Berger and Nelson Piquet. Nelson Piquet in the blue and yellow Benetton, being followed by Gerhard Berger. Very clever camera cut there from McLaren to McLaren, built to fool you and us, but it didn't get us this time.
I'm wondering what are the Brazilian announcers talking about? We got a battle for the lead brewing. We're going to go back and look at this. On board with Gerhard Berger as he attempts to close up behind Nelson Piquet.
Team managers up and down pit road will be watching this little battle because Gerhard Berger has obviously got a clearly superior car. He's also got new tyres. Nelson Piquet still has not stopped to change his Pirelli tires.
He also has a V8 engine on a high-speed course up against a V12. It should be kind of a lopsided battle.
I think you'll see on this start-finish line that now Piquet there, car definitely squirreling. Possibly it's time for him to come in and change those tires.
flashing through. You can see that the track was banked at one time. They just used a small section of the front straightaway here at Jose Carlos Pache. Berger there, applying the coup de grace. Piquet is going to fight him.
Fighting every inch of the way, staying in right there. There goes the first curve.
This track was heavily modified before they moved the Brazilian Grand Prix here a year ago. In fact, there were 10 years when Formula One did not come here. The old track was banked in sections, not big banks like a place like Charlotte or Indianapolis. Excuse me, I didn't even hear on ESPN. We want to tell you about some other programming coming your way later today, live. Major League Spring Training Baseball. It'll be the world champion Cincinnati Reds coming off that Cinderella story in last year's World Series against the new-look New York Mets, who have added, among others, Vince Coleman to bring a little speed to the Mets. 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time, live from Port St. Lucie, Florida today. Preseason baseball here on ESPN. With 45 laps complete of 71 scheduled in the Grand Prix of Brazil, Ayrton Senna is your leader now by 4.2 seconds over this man, Nigel Mansell, who's beginning to lose ground to our race leader. Nelson Piquet is in the Benetton pits. Here's John.
Nelson Piquet is certainly in the Benetton pits, and they did a lot of work on his visor. The very mechanic stepped in between those two wheels and gave him not only a good wiping of the visor, but gave him another tear-off, something I've never seen done before in a very quick Formula One pit stop. But now the Pirellis, their number-1 team, has made the change.
Nigel Mansell here about to put a lap on Emanuele Pirro in the Dallara Judd. Mansell's actually lost a little bit of ground because they've been going through 5 minutes traffic the last couple of laps. He's now 4.1 seconds behind. Certainly not out of it by any means, but has lost about 1.5 seconds over the last 3 laps.
It is Senna, Mansell, Patrese, Berger. Nelson Piquet's pit stop will drop him back out of 5th, so move Alain Prost up to 5th. Jean Alesi back into 6th. Then Roberto Moreno in 8th, who has just been passed by our race leader, Ayrton Senna. So we have 7 cars remaining on the lead lap.
Nigel Mansell still has the fastest lap to his credit, a 1 minute 20.4 seconds. I imagine that will go even away because last year Gerhard Berger in this race did a 1:19 and change for fastest lap. Clouds building up on the windward side of the track, so we may still see more pit stops here as these guys come in and have a frantic change to rain rubber. But as we get nearer and nearer, some of these guys are going to be prepared to take the risk and run even in pretty wet conditions on slicks.
That would be fun, wouldn't it?
And for them, I'm glad I'm up here.
This man can do it. We saw a couple of years ago in Montreal where Ayrton Senna drove around in the rain on slick tires, which runs contrary to anything any engineer would ever tell you. But he was able to lead that race until finally he came in for tires and eventually the engine let go and gave Terry Boutsen the victory. But right now, Ayrton Senna having things all his way as he tries to win his home Grand Prix for the first time in his 8-year Formula One career. The victory would also give him 28, breaking a tie with Jackie Stewart for second on the all-time victory list behind Alain Prost.
Ayrton Senna's list of statistics getting more and more impressive by the day in such things as laps led, miles led, fastest laps, pole positions, race wins, percentage of race wins, and of course percentage of poles are all pretty mind-blowing.
Our old friend Chrissy Kanamaki in his National Speed Sport News brought up an interesting item the other day. Senna now leads in wire-to-wire victories. The late Jimmy Clark led 13 Formula One races start to finish. Senna now has 15 and working on his 16th here today.
Not an easy thing to do, a wire-to-wire Formula One lead. There you see Roberto Moreno, and there is Nigel Mansell running in second spot. Now Senna has not speeded up. Mansell still has the fastest lap of the race, but Mansell has lost a little bit of pace. Could be having a few problems with that gearbox. Could be his tires have gone off a little bit. It may be that he was the guy that was hustling just a little bit quick. We don't know.
Mansell, in fact, has lost a lot of ground, 2 seconds on that last lap. He is now 7.7 seconds down as he attempts to put a lap on Roberto Moreno. Nothing but clear track behind this guy.
Not making much ground on Roberto Moreno through that first left-right S. The center S is the first corner here. Not making much ground on Moreno through there.
There's Senna on the long uphill climb and very steeply uphill into a right turn. Long right-hander at about 3rd gear. And then he enters a tight section of the race. Oh, there's Pierluigi Martini off in the Minardi.
Ooh, well and truly grounded. We got a bridge near home where trucks do that. All four wheels off the ground, which is somewhat inconvenient when you want the car to go.
They have a parking lot here at the racetrack where I may have done it in a rental car, old boy. I forgot to mention that. You may have to push. Martini apparently will give it up.
We don't know where that is because the camera wouldn't shoot, go out enough, pull out enough to let us have a look. So we're not quite sure where he is on the track, but it didn't look like a very good spot to me.
There is Senna. These high shots give you some idea of the speed as he flashes past the grandstand, absolutely packed with his countrymen. That was a part of the track that was banked. You can see it in the background there briefly. As I mentioned earlier, parts of this track were long, sweeping, banked corners before they tightened up the racetrack to slow the cars. This place must have been an absolute monster a dozen years ago when they raced here in Formula One.
There is a word for it, but we won't be mentioning that this afternoon. And that looks like Mansell in.
And he goes past the pits. Let's get to John.
Mansell came in very quickly. He somewhat surprised his crew. They were taking off the tire blankets as he arrived in the stopping area. Oh, no more trouble once again trying to find that first gear. At least he was prepared for it this time. He's out on the track with new rubber. He was losing ground to the leader. Let's see what happens with the brand new, a lot of grip coming out of those C-type Goodyears. I was double checking. They were C's that they put on. They have a very, lots of grip out of the C's. Yes, I'm sorry. I confirmed with Lee Gogg that they are C's going back on the car. We thought they might do some B's, but they are C's.
It was a closer moment than that, John. Nigel rolled forward as the car hit the ground and caught the jack under the front of the car very nearly. This race with 56 laps complete. 15 laps remain of the 71 in the Grand Prix of Brazil, and the skies are dark. There are reports that there is rain on parts of the circuit. It has been raining on and off all day, and it would only be appropriate, I guess, that we see rain before this is over. There's a look, I believe, at the second place car of Nigel Mansell. Yes, that's Nigel in the red number 5 on the front of his Williams. He is running 23 seconds behind. He is cutting enormous chunks out of Ayrton Senna's lead that was 35 seconds at one point.
Well, now, Senna is going to have to make a decision here. If you can see the vortex is coming off the wing on the Williams there. The air is so humid here, it just squeezes the moisture out of the air as it gets compressed over that wing. If Mansell's eating them up at that sort of pace, if Senna's going to come in for a pit stop and maintain his lead, he needs to do it before that lead gets any shorter than it is. On the other hand, he may just decide to stick it out. But Nigel Mansell are showing signs of some sort of wear to us here anyway.
Nigel has made 2 pit stops. He came in the second time with a cut. He was losing air in one of his rear tires, and he is hanging it out on this 2.6-mile racetrack, trying desperately to reel in Ayrton Senna. Now the reports is that the rain is getting heavier on the far side of the racetrack, where Nigel Mansell is just leaving. He's coming up onto what we'll call the front straightaway, not really straight, past the pits, with 14 laps remaining.
14 laps remaining, and he is, 21 seconds down. 2 more seconds in that one lap. So, of course, Senna could be deciding to stay out and wait for a tyre change. If it really is going to rain, if they all think it really is going to rain, they're going to have to come in and change the wet tyres anyway. He may just put it off till then.
Here are the cars that are out of the race. Gabriele Tarquini is out. Maurizio Gugelmin, whose legs were burned in that chemical fire, he is all right, but in some pain, so he is out of the race. Satoru Nakajima is also out for Tyrrell, along with his teammate Stefano Modena. Ivan Capelli in the second Leighton-House is out. Eric Bernard, Andrea De Cesaris, J.J. Leto, Mark Blundell, Aguri Suzuki, Pierluigi Martini, and Eric Comas. I had said earlier that Martin Brundle was out in one of the Brabham Yamahas. That's not the case. He is still out there running around, but several laps down.
Big surge in front of the crowd, in front of us rather. Everybody's suddenly throwing overcoats on, umbrellas are going up. It can't see the rain too much out of the booth window, but it obviously must be raining enough for these people to do that. Now that's the thing that the drivers will see, of course. They'll see the umbrellas going up from the cars.
Running order, Senna, Mansell, Patrese, Berger, Prost, and Piquet. As you see, Prost and Piquet more than a minute down, but all of that could change in the next few moments if the rain starts to come down again. Senna has completed 58 laps. You saw Jean Alesi there in the Ferrari.
The red and yellow, or the yellow with red striped flags out at turn 1, which is normally indicates oil. Of course, just at the moment it's indicating that it's damp and could be slippery.
There is Nelson Piquet in one of the Benettons, leaning hard over with his neck, trying to counteract the incredible G-forces in turning here. At high speeds, these cars will subject their drivers to more than 4 times the force of gravity. they can stop and produce 5 Gs under braking, going from 180 down to 70 miles an hour in about 100 meters and in just over 1 second.
Nelson Piquet in 6th place. That'll get him a point, of course. And he came 3rd just 2 weeks ago in Phoenix. So Nelson Piquet strongly running in the points in the Benetton. New car coming in 2 weeks, or a month, Imola.
Ironically, Nelson Piquet dislodges that man, Jean Alesi, from the 6th and final points-paying position just a year ago. Nelson knocked Alesi off the podium, as I recall.
At this very race.
Yeah,
by
this very
overtaking
race.
him on the last lap.
Dash to the finish line. Senna, Mansell, now just 20 seconds down, still closing in. Patrese, 39 seconds back, so everybody is gaining ground on Senna.
But Senna, of course, is an absolute master at this, judging these races down to the last minute. As he said, I don't care whether I win by 0.4 of a second or 400 seconds, as long as I win. And he's probably got this worked out to a T. He's got 13 laps to go, and he's got a 20-second lead, so he can afford to lose over a second a lap.
Whoa, Nigel has spun. That's Mansell kicking his car back around.
Well, that just shows how slippery it is out there. You can't see it very well. It's not showing very well.
He broke it. I think he broke the gearbox with that spin.
Could be.
You saw all the smoke off the tires as he boiled the hides in 1st or 2nd gear, and I think he has broken the Williams. Oh, what a disappointment. Right here. Trying to get turned around again. Whew.
That's really giving it some stick, that is.
Perhaps a little anger in the driving of Nigel Mansell as he's every lap. Ayrton Senna is your leader by 40 seconds now over Ricardo Patrese. Nigel Mansell has suffered a mechanical problem and is out of the race. Gerhard Berger runs 3rd for the McLaren team, followed by Alain Prost in his Ferrari, Nelson Piquet in the Benetton, and Jean Alesi in the 6th and final points-paying position in the Ferrari. Roberto Moreno runs 7th a lap down, followed by Bertrand Gachot in 8th, Gianni Morbidelli in 9th, and Mika Hakkinen in the Lotus in 10th position.
And that is Mika Hakkinen right behind Ayrton Senna. Boy, I hope Mika Hakkinen doesn't make some ghastly mistake here and run into Senna, who, of course, has turned the wick down tremendously. Now he's got that huge lead over Ricardo Patrese with just 9 laps left to go now. He's just really, really cooling it because he so desperately wants to win this, his home Grand Prix. And I just hope that Hakkinen doesn't get carried away with the great feeling of pride and emotion that he can get by overtaking Ayrton Senna. And hope he doesn't slide into him, because it obviously is a bit slippery out there.
Through Descida do Lago, the trip down to the lakes, as you see. Nigel Mansell has made his way back to the pits, waving to the Brazilian fans. Back to the Williams garage. Back to his airplane for jetting back home to England, to the Isle of Man, where he lives with his wife and children. Ayrton Senna, well out in front, pulling a tear off.
He's pulling it or wiping it?
Could be just wiping his visor. He may not have any more tear off. You may be right, David.
But running a very, very conservative pace now. Lead down to 31 seconds, but with only 8 laps left, 8 and a few hundred yards. That should be no problem at all. I'm sure he's got the whole thing under situation. If you remember at Phoenix just a couple of weeks ago, he slowed right up at the end of that race too. There we see a camera shot that we only just suddenly started seeing in the last 5 minutes. Somewhat confusing the first time we saw it, but it's a good shot. But we haven't seen more of that.
Brazil is the home of the fado, the folk songs that are roughly akin to the American blues. For 7 years, Ayrton Senna has been singing the blues in his home race, but now in his hometown, the Brazilian Grand Prix moved from Rio to Interlagos last year. He could not win it last year when he collided with another car on the track while leading. This year, he has led from the beginning. For the 16th time in his career, it would appear that Ayrton Senna will win a Formula One race from flag to flag.
Well, now you've just said all that about him winning. Thing will probably croak to a halt in the next 3 minutes. But
there is a method to my madness, my colleague.
But he's let us hope he does flag to flag at this stage. It would be absolutely heartbreaking. There you see Ricardo Patrese in the Williams, now in second spot. Ricardo Patrese, who's been going very well all weekend, for a long time yesterday afternoon, held the pole position, was finally squeezed out of it by Senna at the end, and had a great race at Phoenix just a couple of weeks ago.
Riccardo Patrese has been brilliant in qualifying thus far this year. At Phoenix, he did just 3 laps. Warm up, a hot lap, cool down, parked the car third on the grid. Here, he came out and led most of the second session, as you say, and finished second. So a 4th career Formula One pole may be somewhere in Riccardo Patrese's future. He just gets better and better after 210 Formula One starts.
Well, at least he's had plenty of practice. Roberto Marino lighting up the front tires on his car.
A couple of the McLaren crew just about to congratulate each other. I'm not the only guy who thinks that Senna has this thing wrapped up.
Davey, the one that was smiling so broadly there, used to work on the BMW McLaren 320 that I raced back at the end of the 70s.
Saw Roberto Moreno in the Benetton there, being overtaken by this man, Riccardo Patrese.
Gerhard Berger has somewhat salved his position. He looks like he's set for a third position, third place, but he is 37 seconds behind his teammate Ayrton Senna.
14 cars remain in the race. Senna, Patrese, Berger, Prost, Piquet, and Alesi all on the same lap. 7th is Roberto Moreno, followed by Bertrand Gachot and Gianni Morbidelli, each 1 lap down. 3 laps in arrears, Mika Hakkinen in the Lotus, Terry Boutsen with the Ligier, and Emanuele Pirro in the Dallara. 4 laps down is Martin Brundle. Make that 13 cars remain in the race. Nigel Mansell also being shown as 4 laps down, but we have seen his untimely end on the racetrack.
Hakkinen and Gachot are sort of men of the match in a lot of ways. Gachot has had a broken exhaust header for fully 2/3 of this race, which certainly will be costing him some power, and he's hanging on to a good 8th spot there in this brand new
Brazil will come to the final few laps of the Formula One Grand Prix of Brazil. I want to remind you that coming up Sunday, April 7th at 1 p.m. Eastern Time, live here on ESPN, the first NASCAR Winston Cup race of the year, the Trans-South 500 from the track Too Tough to Tame, Darlington, South Carolina. So be sure to be watching Sunday, April 7th at 1 p.m. Eastern Time, live here on ESPN. Ayrton Senna has 3 laps remaining to achieve his goal, long held, of winning the Brazilian Grand Prix. There you see Riccardo Patrese running in 2nd position in the Williams, who is catching up Senna at a prodigious rate. He is closing up several seconds per lap. Of course, Senna is allowing him to do that. We'll see whether he has timed it perfectly.
Well, of course, we're assuming Senna is allowing him to do that. I can't imagine that he has got a problem, but if he has, Patrese is whistling. That's Hakkinen. He went by, and Hakkinen is just a few yards behind Senna.
Fast lap in the race belonged to Nigel Mansell, who is now out of it, way back on lap 35, near halfway. Senna to Patrese, now 5.4 seconds. And once again, to the east and south, where the weather comes from in this part of the southern hemisphere, it is raining hard. We may get more rain before this is over. A crowd of some 100,000 Brazilians on their feet, cheering their man's every move. Ayrton Senna. Let's get a comment from John Bizignano now in the pit lane.
Bob and David, let's remember the rule on this also. At this late stage in the race, the officials could actually throw a red flag due to rain. They would not expect everyone to come in and change tires or try and slip and slide their way around this circuit on slicks. If it's pouring on one side of the circuit, you could see a red flag. And with Ayrton Senna in the lead here in Brazil, the chances of that happening could be even greater.
Well, the lead is down to 4.1 seconds. So if they're going to throw it, they better start thinking about it. There you see Senna going down to the corner between the lakes, and that coming to the top of the picture is Riccardo Patrese. And if it's as slippery out there as it could be, both these guys will be treading carefully. But Patrese has got that carrot. Right in front of him is the race leader.
There will be 1 lap to go this time around. 2 laps to go right now, but we're working lap number 70.
There you see what Ayrton Senna's seeing. We don't see any rain on that lens. Usually pops up if you do. We don't. Yes, there is rain coming onto that lens. The track itself is looking just a little bit, yes, it's changing a little. Locking up the right front there. Obviously very, very slippery out there.
This is the part of the track, a turn known as Bico de Pato, Duck's Bill, because it happens to look like the caricature of a duck, through Mergulho, known as diving uphill, and then into Subida dos Boxes, if you'll forgive my Portuguese, climb to the grandstands.
Well, if you wanted to put your money on anybody when it gets slippery, it's going to be the guy to put the money on. But being hounded hard by Riccardo Patrese.
The flagman gives him 1 lap to go. You know, we think of Honda as the dominator in Formula One, and they are now, but it wasn't always that way. Recall that Honda began in Formula One in the 1960s, driven by a couple of Americans, Ronnie Bucknam and Richie Ginther. Senna waving to his crowd.
Hey, don't do that yet. You're not there yet, lad.
Yeah.
All that rain on that visor. Slippery down there. Tight left-hander here, 3rd gear.
Senna is a very intense man, but he is also very emotional, and I wouldn't be surprised if there are tears in the eyes of Ayrton Senna shortly. And rain coming down very heavily on the backside now. But as David has pointed out, if there's anybody you want to be driving your car in the rain, even on slick tires, it's this man.
If I wanted to get to the airport in a hurry and the conditions were a bit dodgy, that's the guy I have driving my cab.
You may need him to make your airplane tonight.
But it seems to me like he's pulled out a bit more. I didn't see Patrese in that picture at all, which I would have expected.
And the rain now coming down in torrents on the front straightaway. What a way to end the race. The way it was all morning. Absolute horizontal rain and wind. It is coming down in sheets now, but nobody is leaving. They are rushing to the pit walls in their street clothes. No umbrellas, no ponchos. This is a very special moment in Brazil. Look at the track. It is absolutely glassy with water.
This is where the slick tires, of course, become incredibly dangerous.
It is Ayrton Senna to an absolute bedlam. Papers thrown in the air from every grandstand as he heads into the corner named for him, Senna's S. Ayrton Senna has done it. One of the few goals that he has left untouched in Formula One is now complete. He has won his home Grand Prix. Unofficially, it is Senna, Patrese, Gerhard Berger, Alain Prost, Nelson Piquet, Jean Alesi, and Roberto Moreno in the top 7. And the corner workers step out to give a Brazilian flag to Ayrton Senna. Well, let me unfold that for you, pal. That's okay. I'm not taking any victory laps. I'm stopping it right here. There are rooster tails coming up as cars drive slowly up the front straightaway. It is chaos here in Sao Paulo, Brazil.
Oh, I wonder why Senna has decided not to do this victory lap. I wonder if it's something really was wrong with the car. As you can see, the crowd there couldn't care less about the rain, as excited, possibly almost as Senna himself.
That will
even the flag marshals dancing and embracing each other.
Nothing perhaps other than soccer inflames the passions of the Brazilians like Formula One. They have had an incredibly successful lineage of great drivers, including Emerson Fittipaldi, a world champion, including Nelson Piquet, a 3-time Mobil 1 synthetic motor oil. Is it your car worth the extra protection? Buy Squirt and Diet Squirt. Give your thirst a squirt. And by Budweiser, the king of beers, with that clean, crisp, cold taste. Nothing beats the buzz. As the celebrations continue in Victory Lane, we'll give you a look at our overall results. Ayrton Senna over Ricardo Patrese and Gerhard Berger. Alain Prost finishes 4th, Nelson Piquet 5th, and Jean Alesi picks up the final point for 6th position. The next 6, Roberto Moreno, Gianni Morbidelli, Mika Hakkinen finishing for the Lotus team, Terry Boutsen of Belgium in the Ligier, Emanuele Pirro, and Martin Brundle. Bertrand Gachot unfortunately broke with just a couple of laps remaining. A look at drivers' points after 2 events. Ayrton Senna with 10 points for each of his 2 victories, with an 11-point lead in hand over Alain Prost, who has 9. Ricardo Patrese and Nelson Piquet each with 6, followed by Gerhard Berger, Stefano Modena, Satoru Nakajima, Aguri Suzuki, and Jean Alesi. In the constructors' points, McLaren Honda lead Ferrari, followed by the Williams team, Benetton, Tyrrell, and LaRousse. Final comments now in the pit lane. Here's John Bizignano.
Well, Bob, I have to think F1's spelled backward is if Nigel Mansell would not have spun, would he have been able to catch Ayrton Senna? If the rain would have come a couple laps earlier, what would have been the result? Ayrton Senna on the winner's stand, very weak, very shaken. They say that he could have gotten dehydrated, but there's going to be samba tonight in Brazil. This country is going to celebrate from corner to corner.
All right, thank you, John. David, your thoughts on this eventful day?
Well, there's no doubt about it that on the podium there, Senna looked in very, very second-hand condition. And if it had rained and he'd had to make some pretty lightning reflex movements in that car, he obviously would have been difficult. He had a problem with his arms, but unbelievably a satisfying result for him in his own country.
And as if symbolically, the sun has come out over the circuit Jose Carlos Pace to celebrate a victory by a Brazilian. Our next race will be coming your way from Imola, Italy, the San Marino Grand Prix, Sunday, April 28th at 8:30. We hope you'll be watching for that as well. For John Bizignano, David Hobbs, I'm Bob Barsha. It has been a wild day. It began and ended in rain, but there will be celebrations, as John said, all over Sao Paulo for Ayrton Senna's victory. So long from Sao Paulo, Brazil.